Hey, Mac, Delta Fish Co. Thanks for stopping in and checking out my video. It's Labor Day. I didn't go fishing today. It's Labor Day, and if you're ever out on the water during big holidays, it's not fun. For me, it's not anyways. I wanted to make a video on targeting lures, on how I usually approach my mornings. Now, I'm a morning fisherman primarily. I very rarely go out and fish the evenings. I like that 5 a.m., 6 a.m. launch, fish till around noon, and then come off the water, especially during the summer. During the colder months, I may come out a little later, and then stay a little later just because of the sunrise, sunset, and the cooler weather and less boat traffic. But anyways, I wanted to talk to you about targeting lures. Targeting lures are lures that you're going out there and you're not just fan casting an area. Targeting lures are when you're going somewhere in a high percentage spot. It could be a tule bank, it could be a point, but within those high percentage areas, there's high percentage target areas where you would think bass are going to be. Those are the spots where casting accuracy play a big part in getting these lures in there, damn near right on top of their heads, eliciting that strike, locating and eliciting a strike. So for me, I like to start off always just about with a frog. That is a fun lure to catch fish on. It's almost damn near weedless. You can throw it not only at your target, but targets that are inside your targets. And you will find bass in there. The type of frog or the color of the frog, I won't go into details on that, but I like a popping frog or a regular frog. Something I can throw in there, give it a couple twitches, work it, and then pull it out and then throw it in the next spot. Do the same thing until I start locating fish. Great lure for targeting. Catch ratios, with beginners especially, hookup ratios are great with a frog, especially for beginners. Now, when we're talking about tides, on the difference, frog high tide or low tide, does not matter. This is a really weedless lure. When you've got a higher tide and you want to just throw something different, but still a targeting lure, for me, I like the popper. Now, this happens to be a Megabass Pop R or Pop Max, I believe, but it's another favorite of mine to start off with. On a high tide, I like this one. On the low tides, you know, the Delta being a grass fishery, always you've got some type of submerged vegetation, and especially the closer you get to the banks. That submerged, depending on the tide, may even be emerged because it's a low tide, but on a high tide, you usually get a little gap in there. So throwing something with dangling treble hooks can be fun as well while you're out there targeting, hot spots. But the Pop Max is a very successful lure for me, throwing it in there. When it's dark, it's kind of hard to tell, but as the sun comes up, you start to see these pockets and these little target spots to throw that into, and it's a great lure. Mind you, as you retrieve this back, you may end up snagging a little bit more, on submerged vegetation or whatever, but that's just part of it. But another great targeting lure for morning fishing out on the Cal Delta for me. The next one I want to talk about is kind of dual role, and the ones I'm going to talk about next are all dual roles. They do many things, but they do targeting specifically well, as well as these two that I've already mentioned. The next one's going to be the jig, the swim jig. This is an evergreen grass ripper, and I've just got a Yama Crawl on the back. Again, I'm not going to get into colors or size or other name brands, or you'll have to figure those out. But throwing this into these target areas, having it drop in there, giving it a shake or giving it a bounce, If you got nothing, get it back to the boat and hit your next one. Another great one is this one here, the swim jig for doing that. The Evergreen, this one specifically, I'll tell you, the way the head is shaped, when I throw it into covered areas, I've got a better chance of getting it out snag free, the way the head is shaped, and of course it's got the hook guard on it. But another great targeting lure for fishing the Cal Delta. All right, moving on. The spinnerbait. The spinnerbait is a great targeting lure also because it's primarily weedless. As big as it is with the blades on it and the big hook that's on the rear, it's phenomenally weedless. You can throw it into sparse tule and reel it right back through, and it's going to bump everything, which is what you want. But you can hit target spots. Now here's the difference, where you can, if you've got a bank and you've got a sparse tule clump away from the bank, and your first target's on the bank, and as you reel it back, you can cover that distance. Now you can cover that water, hit the secondary cover, and come through and back to the boat. That's a great one for that, because you're constantly moving this bait through, and the blades are spinning, and of course you're changing your retrieves, all that other stuff. But the spinnerbait is a great one for targeting specific spots and moving on until you find where the fish are at or where they're biting. Another great one, and I like to throw this when I've already got some wind or some chop on the water. So I've already got a disturbance over there, so I need to be a little bit more louder than that disturbance. Can you throw this when it's slick calm? Absolutely, and you will get bites off of it. I found that I get more bites when I've got a little bit more wind and chop on the water. Now I won't go into size or color, but the Whopper Plopper. The Whopper Plopper is an excellent bait for hitting targets. Again, accuracy. These will hook up to everything. They have a great hookup ratio to anything that if they look at it wrong, they get hooked up on this thing. But a great targeting lure, again, hitting a primary target and covering the distance between that and a secondary target, so you get the 2-in-1 in there. Just know your low tides, if you've got submerged grass in between the two targets, you've got to get this to the second one, so you're probably going to get snagged on there. Not going to be my choice, but on a high tide, and I've got two spots in between me and the bank or my target, this is the one I'd like to throw in there, with some wind. And lastly, for me, is going to be some type of flipping lure, weighted flipping lure, whether it be a creature bait or a worm, target specific, not just for mid-afternoon, when the bass have gone and they've crawled under cover. So you don't have to solely use this just for punching or flipping during mid-afternoons or hot days. This one, you can throw it up against tules. It's weedless. This one's Texas rigged. You can have your actual punch rig if you decide to put a light enough weight on it. You don't need a lot. You're gonna throw it up there against the tules, let it sink, give it a couple hops. If you got nothing, pull it back, next spot. Same thing, wash, repeat. Anyways, that's my approach to the Delta fishing in the mornings, on how I start it, and what my go-to lures are for searching. Now, as the day progresses, listen, if they're catching, if they're biting this all day long, I'm throwing in the shade spots, I'm throwing it in the pockets, I'm targeting those things, I'm gonna keep throwing a frog. It's just, I love throwing a frog, and I love throwing the pop. If the fish are gonna keep eating it, why stop throwing it? Unless you want to just try to catch them on something else. And I've done that too. But just because they stop biting on this doesn't mean you have to give up on it. You just maybe need to look for another spot. Now, if you're throwing this and you haven't gotten anything for a few minutes, pick something else up and try it. That was a previous video I talked about, is being flexible and giving the fish what they want. Try different things. As day progresses, the sun's high, the fish stop looking up. In my opinion, they start looking forward. you know, putting those chase baits in the water and having them hit those. But again, some of these other baits, you know, fishing a spinner bait or a jig or the whopper plopper all day long from morning till night. I'm not saying you won't catch fish on them, but you definitely still can. For me, again, it's just how I start my day off. Anyways, I hope this gives you a help for, especially for the new guys starting out there on, you know, maybe they're asking, so where do I even start? Do I come out there and start throwing a jerk bait, or do I start off with a worm, whatever? Start off with whatever you want. But for me, mornings, conditions given, normally out on the Delta, I'm starting off with a frog. If the water's right and I've got enough depth below, I'm going to go to a popper, a jig, even a spinner. If I've got a little chop on the water on the top, I'm going to give it something with a little noise. I'm going to go with a plopper. Anyways, hope this helps. I'm going out tomorrow morning, see if I can catch me a few. I hope you guys have a great upcoming week, and I'll get back to you soon. This is Mac with Delta Fish Co. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time.